Good afternoon. This is Catherine Potter. I am going to talk about this article called Why Should I Read? A Cross-Cultural Investigation into Adolescents' Reading Socialization and Reading Attitude by Peter Broder and Mia Stokemans. It was originally published in the International Review of Education and is available through URI in the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy. I am interested in this article and how it relates to Penny Kittle's book love and her exploration of the reading attitudes of high school students. And I am interested in finding out how the reading attitudes of children change from elementary school to middle school, and why there is, it seems that there are not a lot of middle school students reading or that have negative relationship to reading. So this study is by Peter Broder and Mia Stokemans, and they are both professors they're doctors, actually, at the Tilburg University in the Netherlands. And they based their study on Isaac Asian's theory of planned behavior. I'm unfamiliar with that theory, so I will be seeing what information I can find out about that. But the theory, or the starting point using that theory that they want to look at, are three things. They want to determine reading behavior as it relates to the reading attitude, subjective norms, both implicit and explicit, social pressure to read, and the perceived behavior control, which is, for this survey, the reading proficiency and appropriateness of the available book supply. So, because the article is international, the introduction is in several different languages, and here in the English portion, they have a question: what makes adolescents read? So, using the theory of planned behavior, they are going to be looking at three things: the reading attitude, subjective norms, and the perceived behavioral control. They define reading attitude as the way that, in general, a student feels about reading most of the time. Is it a good reaction or is it a bad reaction? And I'm going to come back to this drawing in a moment. And they break down that feeling in two different ways. They believe that there is a hedonic component regarding the emotions and feelings that are felt while reading. And they also feel that there's a utilitarian component that one gets from reading. And that could be the difference between, wow, I really liked that book, I really liked the story, or wow, I learned something. So they're taking a look at those two things. They define the subjective norm as the social pressure that a person gets when they're being either told to read or shown that reading is fun. So they already know by prior research that they looked at that teachers' influence is not something that they want to explore, so they're going to look at just family members and their peer groups. And they're going to look at them in two different ways. Is the norm, is it explicit? Are they being told to read, or are they being punished if they don't read, or looked down upon if they don't read? Or is it implicit? Are they being influenced by behavior that's happening around them? Everyone else is reading, so they're going to read too, and they can see how pleasurable this activity is. Then they look at the third factor, and that's the perceived behavioral control. So they are going to be looking at how these students feel about their reading abilities and the resources or books that are available to them. So they also looked at they chose these three different societies. But there are two different types of cultures. One is individualistic, like the United States, and that one's the Netherlands. And the others are collective, such as the China and South Africa. So so I am really interested in the results from the Netherlands because it, I think, may have some insight into what is going on here in the United States as far as reading attitudes are concerned. So let's go back up to the drawing before. And this definitely is some kind of system or flow, or these are related to each other. As you can see here, they're saying that attitude towards behavior is related to intention, which is then related to behavior. And the subjective norm is also related to intention, which is then related to behavior. And the perceived behavioral control is related to intention, and then that is related to behavior. And that these three are also related to each other. So some correlations could be made between these. The attitude towards behavior, if that's positive, then the intention is going to be positive, and then the behavior will be positive. And then they could somehow wrap around and then influence it all over again. It could be some kind of a cycle. I'm not quite sure yet. I need to work that out a little bit more. All right, so let's go back to where we were here in our paper. They outline how they did the research here in the method. Their main research question is what is the relationship between adolescents' reading behavior and the antecedents of leisure reading attitudes, subjective norm, and perceived behavioral control for the Netherlands, Beijing, and Cape Town. They only surveyed 2,173 students in these three countries. I feel that's a pretty small sample, and that it was probably not random. I'm guessing that these students were chosen for a reason. And that kind of skews the results a little bit. There should have been a lot more students involved in this research. But the other thing that is a little disappointing is that they only looked at storybooks that were read for pleasure. No school books, no textbooks, no hobbies, no magazines. So this also meant that if you like to read nonfiction for fun, then those could not be included either. Another thing that was interesting about the survey is that it consisted of 5 parts. So I'm wondering if these were grouped together or if these were spread out throughout the survey, because it might affect how the questions were answered. So they go through the different parts. If you love statistics, you'll love reading about all of their results and values and how they got their results. I just wanted to go back. All right, so let's see. So they go through the survey and tell how they asked the questions, whether they had scales or if they grouped them together, and come to this neat graph that talks about how much reading's been done in the last week, when was the last book that you read, how often do you read, and how many books do you read. So I found here that this graph of the Netherlands really showed me that overall there's a decrease in the reading pleasure of the students and over the period of time. But in Beijing and Cape Town, that a majority of the students had read a book in the last week or so. And down here again in the Netherlands, they really have no, it's very close as far as there's no big distinction on how often a book is read for pleasure. So although it looks really bad for the Netherlands, it's hard to make assumptions that's based on reading during 1 week's time. I think there could be some factors that could have prevented students from reading, were there exams? Did they have some kind of a weather event? Was there a holiday? So just basing this survey or the results off of 1 week, I think is a little difficult to do. And I really kind of jumped at this statement. It says here that even though the reading is irregular in the Netherlands, according to the surveys, a diary method is probably not appropriate for research, but they're saying that over time the respondents would have to track their reading, and it would be a long time, particularly for irregular readers, for the results to present a reliable picture. And I really think that Penny Kittle would have something to say about that. So maybe the Netherlands needs their own Penny Kittle. So then they took out all the background variables. They really did not look at anything, although they did make comparisons between age and gender. But the ages of the participants were all within 2 years of each other, so that really didn't make too much of a difference. So I'm going to jump down here to the results. I think that's important to take a look at. There's quite a lot of talk about statistics and perceptions. So even though there's a lot of cultural differences between the Netherlands and Beijing, they show a similar pattern, is that the 3 things that contribute to reading attitude, the explicit, implicit, the availability and attitude all come into play. But the most important is the hedonic reading attitude. How does it make someone feel? It's also important that adolescents see their family and friends reading and actually doing it, and that there is a appropriate book supply, and that these students are perceived as being proficient in their reading. So I thought that was interesting. I think that leads to some things that maybe we could implement here in the United States to encourage more kids to read. They need to see adults reading in order to really be influenced to read themselves. So thank you for listening.